enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, which are more dangerous ultimately, folks? The enemy at your gate wearing a uniform, or the enemy inside wearing a suit and tie and talking just like you? Who's going to do you more damage? And America is fantastic. So anybody in this room, I know there's some, obviously, anybody in this room ever had to undergo an FBI background check for a military or civilian position? Quite a few, I would suspect so. Now, is it true that those FBI background checks can be pretty darn extensive? Check out your family background, they go and interview your neighbours, people you went to church with, people you went to school with, depending obviously on the level of security required. They will check out overseas travel, political affiliations, criminal convictions, financial stability, bounced checks, you name it. Because you might be working for the federal government. You might be in charge of a nuclear facility someday. You might be writing policies or laws in your Congress. You might be in charge of education policy for a state. You might be guarding the president someday. And they need to know that you are going to be a loyal servant to the Constitution. But what if you're a young Marxist radical or a young Muslim Brotherhood supporter who hangs around with the local Democratic Party, which is controlled by the local unions, who are controlled by the local communists? And they can get you elected to Congress or even the Senate, where you may serve on the Homeland Security Committee or the Armed Services Committee or the Judiciary Committee or even the Intelligence Committee, overseeing all 16 of your intelligence agencies. How much of an FBI background check does that one take, folks?
None.
Zero.
Zero. Nothing. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? Well, how's that been working out, people? Not too well, has it? You know, they vetted Mitt Romney. They vetted Donald Trump. They vetted Mitt Romney. They told you what Mitt Romney did with his dog on holiday. They told you about him allegedly beating up some young gay kid when he was 17. What they did not drag up about Donald Trump is beyond unbelievable. But why do they not go into this elephant's graveyard of skeletons in Obama's closet or Hillary Clinton's closet? Why does having a D after your name automatically make you a safe and secure person? So you can't rely on the media. Now, so you can be elected to Congress with no background checks. You can serve on the Intelligence Committee. Do you think your enemies may be aware of that little loophole? Do you think the enemies of this country with their intelligence services may be aware of the lack of security precautions around your congressmen and senators? So you imagine you're up in the United Nations. There are hundreds of foreign intelligence officers up there from all different countries, from China and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Cuba, etc. And they are working with your congressmen. They invite them to parties. They go to picnics with their families. They are inviting them to events. They are lobbying them. They're talking to them. They're doing deals with them on a regular basis. And they know some of these congressmen come from very dubious backgrounds. They know some of them are Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers. Some of them are former Marxists or current Marxists. You imagine if you were a North Korean intelligence officer and you'd just spent 5 years in the United States under diplomatic cover, and you go back to Pyongyang and our dictator invites you to his boudoir or whatever for an interview, and he says to you, we've given you 5 years in America, how many congressmen did you recruit for our cause? And you say, oh, none. How do you think that's going to go for your future? How do you think your family's going to fare after that? There is huge pressure on these intelligence officers to get involved with your congresspeople and senators, folks, and they're doing it all the time. all of the time. Now, it's been going on for a while too, you know. Any Vietnam veterans here tonight in the room? Thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to ask a couple of questions of you gentlemen, and one of them is very stupid, but I think you'll see where I'm going. Was the Vietnam War lost in the jungles of Vietnam? Is it true that you weren't really allowed to fight to win? You weren't allowed to invade North Vietnam. You couldn't mine Haiphong Harbour. You know, there's some pretty tough rules of engagement on how you fought that war. Is that true or is that exaggerated? Every serviceman tells me that. So had you been allowed, this is a stupid question, had you been allowed to fight that war to actually win it, to take the fight to the heart of the enemy and invade North Vietnam, could you have done it and pretty darn quickly? 6 months, the country's the size of New Jersey. You know, you had the biggest military in the world over there and you didn't invade them. Funny that. I'll tell a little story too. This was told to me by Admiral Ace Lyons, former commander of the Pacific Fleet. Dean Rusk, who was your Secretary of State at the time, used to get instructions on his desk every night detailing the bombing order for Vietnam the next day, North Vietnam, where your planes were going to fly, what factories they were going to bomb, what cities they were going to bomb, whatever. And every night he would send those instructions to, I believe it was the Swedish embassy in Washington, D.C., who would pass them on to the North Vietnamese. So they could bring their guns to the perfect position the next day to deal with your planes. How many of your airmen, your brave airmen, do you think were shot down because of that man's actions? How many? What penalty did he pay for that, people? Well, you know, you fought that war, you withdrew, and your Congress defunded the South Vietnamese military, guaranteeing a communist takeover. You lost 58,000 men in that war, people. Your comrades in arms, your football buddies, your cousins, your uncles, the guys you went to elementary school with, the guys you played baseball with. I guarantee every member of this room was touched by that war in some way. Everybody here. 58,000 of your boys died, hundreds of thousands of wounded, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese were executed and imprisoned after the communist takeover. The South China Sea was full of boat people fleeing the communist tyranny. 58,000 of your boys who died in a war they were not allowed to win. Well, I say this, folks, that war was deliberately sabotaged in your Congress by congressmen like Father Drynan from Massachusetts, who were working hand in glove with the Communist Party USA, which was taking its orders directly from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was allied to the Communist Party of North Vietnam. Do you think there might have been a little bit of treason there, people? And how many of those traitors who condemned tens of thousands of your boys to completely unnecessary deaths, how many of them paid a single penalty for what they did, folks? Zero. One of them was Obama's Secretary of State, John Kerry, otherwise known as Jane Fonda with less testosterone. And what about John Conyers, people? John Conyers, the congressman from Michigan. How long has he been there now? Like 140, 160 years? John Conyers, I regard as your single most dangerous congressman, because he is on the Judiciary Committee. He is the ranking Democrat on that committee, and as he's been in Congress so long, most of the time the Democrats have controlled the House, he has been the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee oversees the FBI, it oversees your Justice Department. It's very powerful. It sets federal law. Now, on the Judiciary Committee with John Conyers, is a woman called Judy Chu from California. She used to be a very active supporter of the Communist Workers' Party. Very active. This was a militant Maoist group. She has been very active in promoting ties between California and China, and the Chinese press describes her as China's best friend in your Congress. And you want to see Judy Chu go ballistic on the FBI when they dare to arrest a Chinese spy in this country. They're only doing it because they're racist, she says. You want to see Judy Chu protect China's spies in this country from the FBI. And then you have Jerry Nadler from New York, a long-time member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist. And you know, when Acorn was getting into lots of trouble back in the 2009 or so, and Acorn was a front for Democratic Socialists of America, and guess who shut down the investigation into Acorn, people? Was Jerry Nadler. And then you have Luis Gutierrez from Illinois, a long-time leader of the pro-Cuban Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a Marxist-Leninist grouping, elected several times in Chicago with Maoist help, and is very actively involved right now with several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. And then you've got John Conyers, 50-year history with the Communist Party USA, 40 years with Democratic Socialists of America, was at their founding conference, still works there, and by the way, Democratic Socialists of America just set up the Glacier branch of the DSA here a couple of months ago. You've got a branch of the communist movement here in this little city. And then you have, he was also actively involved with the Workers' World Party for about 30 years, which supports North Korea and Iran and Cuba. And John Conyers is also very, very actively involved with several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. And when the Republicans tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organization, you will see in my film how he pushed back, because he called the Muslim Brotherhood a social service organization, a non-violent social service organization. John Conyers is a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist. He is as hardcore as you can get, folks. Yet he has served on the Judiciary Committee for many years, overseeing the actions of your Federal Bureau of Investigation. So you're a young radical, a young Marxist radical, like Nancy Pelosi or Rosa DeLauro or Maxine Waters or Barbara Lee or many of the others I could name. You get elected to Congress. There's no security checks. The media's going to ignore you. And if the FBI ever wants to investigate you, they have to get past John Conyers and Judy Chu and Jerry Nadler and Luis Gutierrez. You think the FBI is going to bite the hand that feeds it, people? I say this, there's at least 100 members of your House and 20 members of your Senate, including your own John Tester, who would be very hard-pressed to pass a basic FBI background check. They are so enmeshed in neo-communist organisations, Muslim Brotherhood front groups, or both, they would not be allowed to sell you stamps at the post office. They couldn't drive a school bus or be a realtor in Florida. Yet they are serving on the Homeland Security Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee. Andre Carson from Indiana serves on the Intelligence Committee, people, overseeing all 16 of your intelligence agencies. He's involved in CARE, ISNA, ICNA, Muslim American Society, you name it. I've got him in my film saying something along the lines like this. He's at a conference, an ISNA conference, Islamic Society of North America conference, and he talks about, well, I think there might be people in the audience spying on us. Well, I say to you, you say we're here plotting revolution, plotting to take down America. Well, I say to you, Allah will not allow you to stop us. Watch the movie. It's a direct quote from him. These are the people serving in your Congress, folks. These are the people serving in your Senate. You've got John Tester, and he's not one of the worst of them, but he's a little bit more left-wing than most Montanans realise. He was at an event with WOLA a couple of years ago. That's the Washington Office on Latin America, a very strong pro-Cuban outfit, very Marxist. And he was there on their honorary committee at one of their big events. Democratic Socialists of America here, Marshall Mayer from Helena, works closely with John Tester. John Tester was also elected and funded by an organisation called the Council for a Livable World. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? We all want a livable world, right? Well, that organisation was set up by a man called Leo Szilard in the 1960s. And Leo Szilard was later identified by a KGB defector as a long-time Soviet agent. And he set up this organisation to fund senators and low population states, relatively cheap races, who could be used to lobby to disarm America, to basically cut your nuclear forces, cut your conventional forces, abolish weapon systems, shut down your military. And John Tester was funded and supported and endorsed by that organisation, one of the most damaging organisations in America. We've got a chapter about them in my book. We also deal with them in the movie. This is your boy, people. This is the man in your state who most people regard as a sort of nice sort of cowboy guy with a flat top haircut, all-American guy. He is nothing of the sort. And I'll talk about Mr. Bullock later. Steve Bullock.
Oh, good.
Well, I want to talk next about what I consider is the greatest national security threat you face right now. And it may surprise you because it is illegal immigration and its sister theme of Islamic refugee resettlement. But I'll talk about the illegal immigration and why it is your number one national security threat. Now, I know there's a lot of refugees from California here tonight. So you tell me if I'm wrong, okay? Tell me if I'm wrong on what I say. Back in the 1950s, there was a Communist Party member in Los Angeles called Bert Corona, big-time activist with the International Longshore Workers Union. He was also a Democrat. He founded the Viva Kennedy Clubs, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up, with a lot of Saul Alinsky money from Chicago, a network of support groups for illegal aliens across Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico and Texas and into Colorado. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, get them work in factories and farms, get their kids into schools, get them settled in America. Now, Corona trained a whole bunch of acolytes to carry on his work for him. 3 of them are very well known in California. They have transformed that state, and the spillover is transforming yours before your very eyes. The first of these people is a man called Antonio Villaraigosa, former mayor of Los Angeles, probably the next governor of California after Jerry Moonbeam goes. Okay? So Antonio Villaraigosa is a hardcore Marxist. He used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He turned Los Angeles into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and the illegals flooded in the hundreds of thousands, changed the entire area. Second member of this group, and they are a group. You heard recently that California is giving driver's licenses to illegals. Well, the man who engineered that and many other similar actions is a guy called Gil Cedillo. He was a very big supporter of the Communist Party, and he was also, until recently, the Democratic head of the California State Senate. Big-time Marxist. The third member of this group, another Marxist, the most powerful woman in Southern California, in my opinion. She now serves on the Democratic National Committee. She was the former head of the California AFL-CIO. Her name is Maria Elena Durazzo. She is behind the massive union-driven and union-paid-for Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that have transformed, that have basically added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters, legal and illegal, to the California rolls in the last 20 years. Almost all of them Democrats. They had their first success back in 1996 in Orange County when the unions poured into that area, into Santa Ana. They signed up thousands of illegals, they committed massive vote fraud, and they got rid of B1 Bob Dornan and gave you Loretta Sanchez. Complete Marxist. They got rid of one of the most conservative members of your Congress and gave you a radical. And they just duplicated that across California. Now you cannot elect a conservative in California now statewide for love nor money. Now the leader of the amnesty movement today is a man called Eliseo Medina. You've seen him on TV wearing a purple shirt, leading an amnesty rally, former executive vice president of SEIU. He is the man Obama would go to on all issues of immigration, a regular visitor to the White House. He is the man who got the amnesty bill pushed through your Senate a few years ago. He is the undisputed leader of the movement, a member of Democratic Socialists of America, a complete and utter Marxist. Now, I just want to ask a little question. Any former or current union members here tonight? I'm not going to persecute anybody. I know this is, Okay, well, here's a question, people. SAG, was it? Okay. Which organisation in America 30 years ago was the most militantly opposed to illegal aliens? Which organisation was constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties on any employer caught employing illegals? It's the unions, the AFL-CIO, Cesar Chavez and the farm workers. Cesar Chavez used to have people on the border. Cesar Chavez employed a woman whose job it was to identify illegal workers in the fields and turn them into the INS. And that woman is now married to Eliseo Medina. The hypocrisy, people. So the unions understood that illegals took union jobs and they lowered wages and conditions and they could be used to break strikes. It was very logical for the unions to oppose illegal immigration, was it not? So in 2017, in the last few years, which organisations have been pushing the hardest to legalise the illegals? It's the unions, AFL-CIO, SEIU. The unions are hardcore. So why the change, people? Well, a change occurred because of an event that happened in 1994, 1995. See, American labour unions before that point were run by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. They were America first, they were patriots, and they actually cared about their members. But in 1994, 1995, Democratic Socialists of America, the Marxist group that's just set up here, that was the year they took over the AFL-CIO. They got their man, John Sweeney, elected as president. They removed the anti-communist restrictions from the AFL-CIO constitution. You could not serve as a communist in the AFL-CIO up to that point. They removed that constriction and the radicals came flooding in. All those 60s radicals became union organisers and union presidents, and now every single major labour union in this country is controlled by Marxists. SEIU, AFSCME, United Auto Workers, Labourers, Teamsters, you name it, they run them. So now you have a situation where 15 to 20,000 communists control your unions. So it's a big deal, unions are 11% of the workforce, right? They're not like they used to be. But you tell me this, even in Montana, you tell me one elected Democrat in this country from county commission to federal level who does not owe his job to the unions. for money, for manpower, for get out the vote, for vote fraud, you name it, people, the unions do it. So 15,000 communists took over the unions, and the unions took over the Democratic Party. They purged all the good guys. Joe Lieberman, the senator from Connecticut, was the last one to go, far too pro-Israel. They purged the Dixiecrats, the Southern conservatives. Now the Democratic Party is a party of the hard left. Nobody gets elected to Congress or the Senate in the Democratic Party if you don't toe the socialist line. Nobody. And it's a real pity that all those patriotic, conservative, democratic voters out there, and there are millions of them, don't realise they're still not voting for JFK and Harry Truman, people. Their party has been completely hijacked. I'm not letting the GOP off the hook. I'm just telling you what has happened to the Dems. So the Democrats were also very anti-illegal immigrant. You should have seen the speeches Bill Clinton used to make condemning illegal immigration. You used to see Harry Reid going on about it, what a national security threat it was. It was going to bring terrorism, disease, it was hurting American workers. But then they cottoned on to something, folks. And this is the point I'm getting to. So Eliseo Medina went into the unions, and after that 1995 victory, he lobbied the unions, and in 2000, at their convention in Louisiana, they changed their policy 100% from opposition to illegal immigration to complete support for amnesty. 100% reversal. Now the big question is why they did that. Well, Eliseo Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. in 2009. I've got him on tape saying this in my movie. I've got him on my book saying this. He got up in front of the comrades and said this: passing amnesty for our 11 million undocumented workers is the #1 priority of the progressive movement. We have to get citizenship and voting rights for these people. And did he talk about compassion or reuniting families or the American dream or the nation of immigrants? Not a word, folks. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we stand by these people and give them citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, forever. Think about it, people. Mitt Romney lost by 2.5 million votes. Donald Trump won by about 200,000. There are between 12 and 30 million illegals in this country. They will vote 80% plus Democrat. That is between 10 and 24 million new votes for the Democratic Party. How do you hope to compete against that, folks? How do you have any chance of ever winning another presidential election or even most state elections? Why do you think Hillary Clinton promised that she was going to legalize every illegal immigrant in this country and give them voting rights within 100 days of taking office? Why do you think Obama, before the 2014 election, went hardcore trying to push amnesty through, even though he knew it was probably going to cost him the Senate? Which it did, because Obama is a Leninist. 2 steps backwards, 1 step backwards to get 2 steps forwards. So what? We give the Republicans the Senate for a term. Big deal. We get amnesty. We'll never be beaten again. Ever. One party state, people. And if you think the Democrats are arrogant now, what do you think they'd be like with 10 to 24 million new votes in their pockets and the Republicans permanently out of office? You think this country will become like France or Germany, as Sean Hannity keeps telling you? Or would it become like Venezuela pretty damn quickly and Cuba not long after? Because that is the plan, people. That is why they are doing this. These people are Marxists. They want a one-party state. They are not Democrats anymore. They are basically a Marxist party who wants a permanent majority, just as every other Marxist-Leninist party does around the world. And once they've got power, they will use every dirty trick, every illegal tactic, every bit of thuggery they can muster to keep that power. As Lenin said, it is not the gaining of power that is important, it is the keeping of power that is important. This country was that far away from a one-party state. You were that close, people, because we all knew that Hillary Clinton was going to win, right? But how many of us realised what she was going to do when she did win, and how many of us realised that that would have taken America away forever? It would have been gone, people. And have you ever seen in your life, well, I want to say, who thinks there might have been a touch of the miraculous on that election? Just a little bit. It was definitely the hand of God there, people, because we all knew that Hillary was going to win, right? The whole world knew that Hillary was going to win. Couldn't be any other way. And when you saw Ohio fall, and when you saw Florida go, did you sense something in the air, people? And I'll tell you something else. One of my most memorable, I was floating after that election, but one of my most memorable memories of that night was about 2 o'clock in the morning when they panned the Democratic Party headquarters. And did you see all those snowflakes bawling their eyes out? Well, the Germans have a phrase. They call it Schadenfreude. It is taking pleasure in others' pain. And it's not a very pleasant thing, right? But did you feel a little touch of Schadenfreude that night? And did you think you deserved it after 8 years of Obama? I certainly think you did. I hope you enjoyed it to the max. But the thing is, so this is, have you ever seen as much vitriol against the president in your lifetime as against this one? Have you seen such concerted attack from Hollywood and the media and the radicals on the street and the rhinos and you name it? Have you seen a president attacked like this? See, why are they so angry? Well, you think about it. They had the one-party state in their grasp. And they were going to have power over you forever. They were so excited. They had it in the bag, people. And they are like a bunch of kids who thought they were going to get the best bike you've ever seen for Christmas, and they got a pair of socks. They are bitter. They are bitter with holes in them. Exactly. They are bitter and twisted, folks. All that work going down the drain. But it's even more than that. Because, see, if you're a Democrat, you have a base, and you own that base, right? You own the black population. You own those white union guys. You own the gays. You own the Muslim Americans. You own the Latino Americans. You own a bunch of the Asian Americans. You own those people. They are your base, and they keep you in power. And when Donald Trump went to the white union guys in Pennsylvania and Ohio and said, I don't see a lot of jobs out here, guys. I see a lot of closed down factories. What have the Democrats done for you guys lately? Why don't you vote for me? And a lot of them said, hell yeah. And when he went to the black communities, and he went to them and said, oh, look, I don't see a lot of jobs in your communities. I see a lot of crime, a lot of drugs. And just by the way, how do you know how secure your borders are, people? It is by the price of heroin on your streets. America has got the worst heroin epidemic it's had for decades. Young people are dying in Utah from heroin, people, because the Democrats kept the borders open for 8 long years. Didn't matter how many drugs came into your country, as long as those voters came through. Had most illegal aliens voted Republican, how long do you think it would have been if Obama had the biggest fence on the border you have ever seen? But he went to the black communities He said, I see a lot of poverty, I see a lot of crime, I see a lot of drugs, no employment. You've been voting Democrat for 40 years. How's that been going for you? And they said, well, yeah, maybe not so well. He said, well, vote for me. What have you got to lose? And a whole bunch of them did. And when he went to the, and everybody says, oh, all illegals are for amnesty, right? All the Latinos are for amnesty. There's a lot of legal Latinos in this country who do not want amnesty. They came the hard way. They think everybody should come the same way. Mm-hmm. And when Donald Trump stood against amnesty, a lot of Latino voters came across for Mr. Trump as well. And that was enough to destroy the Democratic Party's base. And that is why they are freaking, people. Because their base that has kept them in power for so long could crumble to nothing if Donald Trump is a successful president. That's right. He could realign politics for 50 years, keep the Democrats out of power for decades. You imagine if he can get on top of the illegal immigration, if he can get on top of the crime in the inner cities, bring back law and order. You imagine if he can open up the energy fields so you can drill your own oil and natural gas and not depend on Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. You imagine if he can bring back the jobs to the Rust Belt. You imagine the trillions of dollars that will flow back into this country, folks. You imagine the investment that will come back into your country like it did under Ronald Reagan. You imagine the jobs and prosperity that you could have if these policies have a chance to take hold. The taxes come down. The regulation on business comes down. The Democrats are freaking, people, because they understand that if he's successful, they are done. So this is their plan. This is the plan to take you down, folks. We are at a tipping point right now. Donald Trump's election was not a change in direction so much, it was a reprieve, a second chance. Another chance to work even harder to save this country. And if you look at the Bible, people, there's a lot of second chances in the Old Testament. You guys going off the reservation, you better get back on board. And sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. But how many third chances were there in the Old Testament, folks? How many third chances were there? So we're on the second chance. We have been given another chance against all the odds, a miraculous chance to work even harder to turn this country around. That's what we've been given. And if we blow that one, people, I wouldn't want to be holding out my hand for another one. So the left's plan is very simple. We are going to do everything we can to discredit the president. We're going to do everything we can to create chaos in this country, to stall him, impeach him, to destroy law and order, to stop his program, single thing we can. The communist radicals on the street right now, Antifa, their job isn't so much to create a revolution, it's to create so much chaos that the Republican rhinos have an excuse to join the Democrats to impeach the president. That is their plan. Thank you. Thanks very much. They want to impeach him if they can, stall him, tie him up in court, because they want to come into 2018 with very few achievements and say, what you elected and what do you got? You might as well go back to the Democrats. At least we gave you money. And then they want to come into 2020 and do the same thing. But they have an even more sinister plan here. Who remembers the old Rainbow Coalition of the 80s? Jesse Jackson's famous Rainbow Coalition. He ran twice, 84, 88. He got 7 million votes the second time. His brilliant idea was you get the radical whites, the blacks, the Latinos, white, black, brown, the gays, lavender, the Native Americans, red, the Asian Americans, yellow, and you get this beautiful rainbow coalition of progressive radicals and unite them into one movement, and it carries you to victory. Well, and that worked very well, but there just wasn't the minorities in those days to carry it off. Well, there's a man out of San Francisco called Stephen Phillips. He's got a book out there called Brown is the New White, endorsed by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi. Serves on the board of the Center for American Progress. Very big, very active progressive. He was a member of the League of Revolutionary Struggle at Stanford University in the 80s. He worked on Jesse Jackson's campaign for a whole year in 1988. And he is out there now telling all the Democrats, forget about the middle. Don't worry about the middle people. Don't spend a lot of money trying to seduce people away from the Republicans, that imaginary middle voter. Double down on the progressive base. Go hardcore progressive. Rebuild the Rainbow Coalition. Now this is the man who basically was the first man to fund Barack Obama. He married into the very wealthy Sandler family out of San Francisco, big Democrat donors, and he was the man who got behind Obama right at the beginning. He is right now working with groups all over the country, sending thousands of people down to the southern states to sign up every black, Latino, Asian American and Muslim American voter they can. They're pouring into Tennessee, they're pouring into Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia particularly. They're backing the governor, Stacey Abrams as the governor of Georgia. They're behind Ben Jealous, who's standing for the governorship of Maryland. They're trying to recreate the Rainbow Coalition. They have also backed one or two white candidates, one or two progressive white candidates to carry their banner. And one of them, one of the very few white candidates they backed, is a man called Stephen Bullock. Anyone know him? He has an organisation, Mr. Phillips has an organisation called Power Pack, and they were right in behind Bullock and got him elected in this state. Their plan is to basically... There was two people around Mr. Phillips at Stanford. He had a whole bunch of people around him. One of them was a man called Cory Booker, who's now the senator from New Jersey. He also had a woman whose sister was a lady called Kamala Harris. It's a new senator from California. So Cory Booker's black. Kamala Harris is mixed black, Asian American. They are going to run the ticket in 2020 with Cory Booker or Deval Patrick, the governor of Massachusetts, probably with Kamala Harris, maybe with Elizabeth Warren, or possibly one of the Castro brothers from San Antonio, Julian or Joaquin. They are going to reinvigorate the Rainbow Coalition. They're going to sign up every black voter, every Latino voter, promise them amnesty. They're going to sign up every Asian American voter, Native American voter and Muslim voter they can. Because Steve Phillips has this theory, he calls it the new progressive majority. He says that 26% of the electorate are progressive whites. They will vote Democrat if Adolf Hitler was on the ticket. They wouldn't care. Hardcore Democrats. 25% of the electorate are progressives of colour. Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American, Muslim American, and they put the gays in there as well. 26 plus 25 is 51%. The new American majority. So the plan is very simple. Smash Donald Trump to smithereens, divide his base, disappoint his base, discourage his base so they don't turn out. And then they're going to run Cory Booker and probably Kamala Harris and get the black base fired up, the Latino base fired up. They're going to promise them all amnesty, and they aim to win in 2020. Then they will legalize every illegal immigrant in the country. Then they will ramp up the refugee resettlement from the Middle East. And then they have you where they want you. And you will never be able to challenge them again. That is their plan, people. I'm not saying this plan has to succeed, but that is their plan. So we have a choice. I heard a Tea Party lady not long ago say, well, we've got Mr. Trump in the White House now. We don't need the Tea Parties anymore. Donald Trump is being hammered by the media, by Hollywood, by the rhinos, by the Democratic Party, by the communist radicals on the streets, by the a whole bunch of countries, by the Muslim Brotherhood, by Kerry, you name it. He is under pressure from every single sector. He hasn't got a lot of friends up there. The only bunch of people who aren't giving him lots of pressure is the base who elected him. We have to change that, people. We have to be with the president, pushing him every ounce of the way to do the right thing, getting on his case if he does the wrong thing, and encouraging him like crazy if he does the right thing. As American citizens, do you have any other responsibility other than making sure your Constitution is protected? And you have to do this, people, because if we let this one slip by, I don't want to see the mood in this country in 2020 when Cory Booker is the new president and he signs the executive order legalising 30 million illegals in this country. How do you think you'd feel that day, people? You can't come to New Zealand, sorry. So this is where we are. This is a tipping point. If we win this, if this president is successful, and the money comes flying back into this country, and the economy is freed, and the money starts flowing, and the factories are built, this will change the whole culture. You know, think of how many 60s hippies became good conservatives because of Ronald Reagan. I bet there's one or two in the room. I won't point you out, I can tell by looking at you. Or you think of all those young Bernie kids who've been indoctrinated in the universities. If Donald Trump can turn around the economy, if they can move out of their mom's basement, if they can get $80,000 a year jobs and get married and have kids and have mortgages and have a future, how long do you think they're going to follow this Bernie garbage, folks? We could change the whole culture. That's the upside. So we have a choice. We can sit back for the next couple of years and cruise and hope things go well. Hope. Or we can give it everything we've got, get as active as we possibly can for God, for Constitution, for country and family. Amen. That's what we can do. Now, Steve Bannon has a great plan, and this is something we could all get behind. We've got to hold the House in 2018, but we can increase the majority in the Senate. Because Donald Trump doesn't actually have a majority in the Senate. He's got a majority of Republicans, but do you call John McCain and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins Republicans? No. They are Democrats, people. And they are the gap that he needs to cross to get his policies through. Well, Steve Bannon knows that there's about 20 Democrats up for election in the Senate in 2018, including John Tester, and there's only 8 Republicans. Steve Bannon is going to primary 7 of them. Every one of them except Ted Cruz in Texas. Right? Now, we just saw the victory of Roy Moore in Alabama. He's going to win that race. He's going to be in the Senate. So you imagine if you had Roy Moore in there and 4 or 5 more real conservatives who care about the country, not fake Republicans. Is there anything more worth doing in the next couple of years than making sure we win the Senate in 2018 with real conservatives and go on to win the presidency again in 2020? That's something you can do in your state, people. John Tester is very vulnerable. I want to make sure he isn't just beaten by a Republican, but by the most conservative, constitutionalist, patriotic Republican that you can find in your state. And I know you've got plenty of them, folks. More than anywhere else. Can you think of any political activity that would bear more fruit than that in the next year or two? That's what you can do. You can phone bank, you can door knock, you can get behind your favourite primary candidate, you can find who's the most conservative, you can get money for them, you can do all of this. If you don't live in state, find one of the 7 or 8 others you can get behind. If we can flip the Senate with real conservatives, with Donald Trump as president, you can change the direction of this country completely. Trump can get his agenda through. And you remember, people, how much Republicans used to hate Ronald Reagan. They hated him. Ronald Reagan was banned from Ohio in 1976 by that state's GOP. He was a crazy, way-out right-winger. He would bring the Republican Party into disrepute. He was a disgrace. How many Reagan dinners do they hold today, folks? They weren't so proud of him back then. But when he won, and when the people started to respond to him, and the economy picked up, a lot of those rhino Republicans got behind the president. Well, if Donald Trump can get the taxes down and end Obamacare, and he has 5 or 6 more really good conservatives behind him in the Senate, the go-alongs to get along will go along with him. They will see the writing on the wall. I say 1/3 of the Republicans are big government progressives. 1/3 of them couldn't tie their own shoelaces. 1/3 of them are patriots and constitutionalists. We have to make that third a half. We have to make it a bigger majority. And if we can do that, you can change this country even more so than Reagan did. You imagine this country had there been a 2-term Carter presidency. There'd never been a Ronald Reagan. You imagine. Don't ever tell me elections don't matter, people. If Jimmy Carter had won that second election, you imagine the horrible country you'd probably be living in today. And Reagan turned that around, folks, because the grassroots people, against all the rhino opposition, forced their candidate onto the Republican Party. A little bit like happened in the last election, right? Well, we can have the same results again, maybe even more. So what I'm asking from you people, I know there's a lot of political activists in this room. You put money in, you door knock, you put up yard signs, you hold meetings, you hold rallies, you phone bank. You do all of this kind of stuff at great personal sacrifice and get very little thanks for it. In fact, quite a lot of the opposite. Well, I'm saying this, people. I am asking you, if you're ever going to be politically active in your life, I want you to give the next 2 and 3 years the most effort you have ever done. Because this next 2 years is going to make more difference than any other thing you've done in your life. As far as your children's life goes, your grandchildren's life, the future of this country. And not just the future of this country, the future of the free world, people. Nobody can lead the free world if it ain't you. Ireland can't do it. Liechtenstein can't do it. You can do it. Only America can do it, with help. So I want to say to you, the downside if we do nothing and lose is horrible. Your children will live in slavery in this land, and slavery will spread across the globe to every corner of the planet. But if you give it everything you've got, everything that's within you for your God, your country, your constitution, and your family, 2 things may happen. You may give it everything you've got and still lose. But at least you will earn the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I damn well could. What is that worth to you, folks? And if you win, and you can win, because God has not finished with this country yet, people. You look at your American Revolution. You had a bunch of farmers and lawyers and blacksmiths with squirrel rifles taking on the world's greatest military empire. How stupid was that, people? How insane was that? Who would do such a dumb thing? And they were beaten across every state. They were dodging British bullets and eating snow and freezing and eating berries to survive. Away from their homes for months at a time. They might get back to their farm and all they'd find would be a burnt out farmhouse and some graves. And they persevered for years. I was at Morristown, New Jersey not long ago. That was your troops spent the winter of 1780 there. And that was a little ice age. That was like Montana in Pennsylvania in winter, people. That was terrible. 10,000 troops started that winter, and death, desertion and disease took 4,000 of them. The officers were eating their pet dogs to survive. The troops were eating their boots. They weren't paid for months. The money they got, the Continental, was worth a Continental. It was nothing. But they persevered through that winter. And George Washington went to Valley Forge and he got down on his knees and prayed. And he got up and he went on to take out the British at Yorktown and other surprise attacks and turn the course of the war. One bullet could have snuffed out that revolution, people. And he didn't just change the course of the war, he changed the course of human history. It could have been snuffed out by one stray bullet, but it wasn't. You could have been destroyed in the Civil War, but you weren't. You could have been destroyed by the Soviets or the Nazis and the Japanese, but you weren't. Every time America has faced a challenge, you've beaten it and come back stronger than before. And every time you've had miracles to help you, people, and leaders have been risen up to lead you to where you needed to go. Has the age of miracles ended?
No.
You saw the last election, people. God has not finished with this country yet. So we are looking, what I'm asking for you, people, give it everything you've got. If you lose, the least that can happen is you look your kids in the eye with pride. But if you win, and you can win, I absolutely know you can win. You can turn around this country. You can turn around the economy. You can reinvigorate the Constitution. You can spark liberty revolutions all over the globe and usher in an age of freedom and prosperity like man has never known before. You can do all of that. So I'm asking you, people, please give it everything you've got. Is there anything more worth fighting for than your God, your Constitution, your country, and your family? Nothing. So I want to say to you, people, thank you so much for what you do for America, for my country, and for liberty. God bless America, and God bless Montana. Thank you. Thank you very much.